Oh, good morning, church. Hey, I don't know how to take this, but some of you all were like, hey, the last couple weeks sermons were really good when you were sick. How you feeling now? And I'm like, I'm feeling better. And they're like, oh. So I don't know what that means, but it might mean this is not very good, but that's the way it is. Hey, I want to let you know that today is Move Up Sunday, which means we have a lot of students and kids that went from one grade to the next today. And that includes all of our sixth graders. Now, we at Golden Hills, we don't have a middle school and high school ministry that meets on Sunday mornings. We have some classes that are on offer, but we believe that our middle schoolers and high schools should be worshiping with their parents and the church at large, because that is a part of discipleship. And so today is the first day that our sixth graders are now joining us in the service. And so we want to welcome them and thank them for being here. Now, one of the best things that you can do as a sixth grader to get yourself ready for listening to the sermon is have the little clipboard and take some notes. And just understand we'll be here for a little while. This will be a shorter sermon than normal by probably 2 minutes. And so that's about it. If you have a copy of God's Word, which I always encourage you to bring a copy of God's Word, I want to invite you to open up to the book, not of 1 Peter, but of Proverbs. So we're in the once again, I don't know how to take that. So not in the New Testament, we'll be in the Old Testament. So one of the ways that you can find the book of Proverbs, if you're unfamiliar, is open your Bible halfway. You'll probably hit the book of Psalms, make a right-hand turn, you'll hit Proverbs. We're going to be looking in chapter 1, and we'll look at some verses in chapter 2, and then we'll hightail it over to chapter 9. And so even though the text says 1 through 9, I ain't got time for that. But we'll look at some verses within that frame. I don't know if you've ever watched Mission Impossible, whether the movies or the old school TV shows, but there's always this very, very famous line in the Mission Impossible movies. You probably know it, and it's this: your mission, should you choose to accept it. And then it's whatever, and it's usually is to save the world. And then just the spoiler alert, the world's about to be destroyed, and then it doesn't get destroyed, and everything's happily ever after. So you don't need to watch the movies now. You know exactly what happens. But anyways, when it comes, this sounds crazy, but when it comes to looking at the book of Proverbs, I would say that if you have a Mission Impossible mentality, that this is your mission, should you accept it, you'll probably have a good handle of the book of Proverbs. And the reason I say that is because what the book of Proverbs does is gives you as a reader an opportunity to choose. And it would sound something like this: your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to acquire wisdom and knowledge and understanding so that you can live a blessed life for your community and experience God's promises for yourself. If you do not accept this mission, you are a fool. And the end of life for a fool is despair, destruction, and death. This message will self-destruct in 3 seconds or whatever. But that's the basic idea of the book of Proverbs, is you have the opportunity laid out before you to choose. And your mission, should you accept it, is to be wise. If you choose not to be wise, then you're choosing to be a fool. And the end of wisdom is life, but the end of foolishness is death. So we're going to open up to the book of Proverbs. And before I start reading, let me ask this question, which is probably a good one. What is a proverb? So let me define proverb real quickly, and then we'll jump into reading some proverbs. A proverb is basically just a really short statement that's trying to communicate some truth or other. And so we have things like the early bird gets the worm, little axiom, little proverb, which means if you're lazy and lay in bed all day, you're probably not going to accomplish much. But if you wake up disciplined and eager, you'll probably be a productive person. So there's truth behind that little saying, the early bird gets the worm. Bruce Waltke, who's an Old Testament scholar, he writes this: the purpose of a proverb is to compel the readers or hearers to compare their lives to the truth of the proverb. Readers should ask themselves if they can see connections between the proverb and their own reality. The result will oftentimes depend on the reader's particular life situation. So although a proverb is always true, he writes, it may not always be true for every given situation. So let me just summarize that by saying a proverb is a really short statement that contains truth. And our responsibility as readers or hearers of Proverbs is to try to discern, to think about the truth of the proverb as it relates to the reality of our own lives. And we want to try to align our lives with the truth of the proverb. But there are some situations in which the proverb may not work in that particular situation, and we may need another proverb, and I'll show you some of that today. Proverbs require a bit of thinking to unpack it. And I'm just gonna tell you, heads up, if you don't wanna think, or you think thinking is lame, you are a fool, according to the book of Proverbs. I don't mean that as an insult, just kind of stating the reality. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna be looking at an overview, a very short, real quick overview of Proverbs. And what I've done is I've given you 5 P's to help you understand the book of Proverbs as an overview. We're gonna be looking first at the purpose of the book of Proverbs. We'll be then looking at the practicality, how it affects you or the ways in which it can help you. Then we'll be looking at the proposal of Proverbs, what it offers you. And then we're looking at the profitability, that is, what does it benefit you? And then the last thing is the pathways of the book of Proverbs, the 2 pathways that is on offer. And then we'll ask a really important question, which is, how does all this apply to Christ? What does this mean for our understanding of Jesus? And in answering that question, we'll then share the Lord's Supper together as a church. There's our roadmap. You all ready? Let's roll. We'll start with the purpose of Proverbs. And we see it in verses 1 through 7. And so we see that the book of Proverbs is the wisdom of Solomon, basically, that's handed down to us in proverb form. Verse 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. If you recall, Solomon is the wisest man. He prayed for wisdom. God gave it to him. He's the 3rd king over Israel. He's a wise man, and yet we realize, even given all his wisdom, he acts like a fool, which tells us wisdom is not IQ, and it is not PhDs, because there's a lot of dummies out there who have high IQs and PhDs, but there's also a lot of people out there who know the right thing to do and yet fail to do it, and those are dummies too. So the wise person is not only the one who knows what to do, but it's the wise person who actually does it. He goes on to say this, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and let the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So as I ask myself the question, what is the purpose of Proverbs? And we look in verses 1 through 7, we can see that in verses 2 through 6, we're actually given a purpose statement, so to speak, of what this book is all about. Now, I know that you have a Bible in your lap, and I encourage you to keep looking at it, but I also have put the verses on the screen because there's some things I want to highlight, and sometimes when me telling you to look at things, you may like, wait, what thing? What am I supposed to look at? And so I'll doodle on the screen so you can see different colors and the things I want to show you. If I was to ask the question, what is the point or purpose of Proverbs? I would answer it by looking at the 2-letter word, oh boy. Let's stop all that nonsense. I would look at the 2-letter word, to. And that will give us the answer to what is the purpose of Proverbs? Well, the purpose of Proverbs is to know wisdom and instruction. Now, I want to highlight the fact that this verb to know is actually governing 2 concepts, which is wisdom and instruction. And so what it is we should know wisdom and we should know instruction. So let's ask the question, what is wisdom? What is wisdom? I think that's a good question. Wisdom is a big concept, but it basically means this. Since God created the world in wisdom, by wisdom, through wisdom, then when you look at what he has created, there should be wisdom in the reality that is created. And whatever is created should align itself with the wisdom that God gave or showed or used of the reality he created. Let me say it differently. The one who believes God has created the world with wisdom, in wisdom, by wisdom, they should align their life with God's created order in the reality in which they live, in their real life. And so what that means is God is creator and everything is creation. And since everything was created by and with wisdom, all of creation should then align itself with God's wisdom that created it. Now, to put it in human terms, it would be this: God created me in wisdom. God created the world in which I live in wisdom. So for me to be wise is to align myself and the world in which I live, align it to God's wisdom that he has revealed in his word. And when I align myself in the reality God's created to what God has revealed in his word, then I am a wise person. In other words, the purpose of Proverbs is to know wisdom. It's to develop the skill of how to navigate through life in conformity to God's will. Let me say it again. The book of Proverbs is helping us to know the skill in navigating the world in conformity to God's will. Which means a fool is somebody who does not live in conformity to God's will. A fool is somebody who doesn't know how to navigate in life according to God's will. And an important aspect of wisdom, as we'll see in the book of Proverbs, is when you live wisely, you will actually be a blessing to yourself and to the community in which you live. Fools are a problem. They're a bug, not a feature. So we need to know wisdom, and the book of Proverbs will help us. But also we need to know instruction. Now this word instruction here is connected to another Hebrew word that has to do with discipline. And so instruction and discipline really go hand in hand. My wife, Heather, is a fourth grade teacher. And so every once in a while, she'll give an assignment to her students, and she'll say, now here are the instructions, And inevitably, one of the students will run up to her desk, here you go. It's all completed, except for completed wrongly. And she will simply hand back the paper and said, you did not do this correctly because you did not listen to the instructions. Because it's not just one thing to hear instructions. The purpose of instructions is to do them. So Proverbs helps us not only know what God has instructed us, but also for us to know that we should do what's been instructed of us. And so that is helpful. Proverbs, purpose. You know how to navigate life according to God's will, and you will know how to go about doing the things God has told you to do. The second thing we see is to understand words of insight. Now, this is a really interesting thing because the word understand and the word insight share the same root, which tells us that they're kind of from the same word family. And the word family is about interpretation. It's about trying to make sense of a situation. And so to have understanding and of the words of insight, the insight and understanding is like you're kind of making sense of things, and you're like, okay, what does this mean? Kind of like what you're doing right now with what I'm talking about. But let me give you a real life example. You're heading over to, SFO to fly out on vacation. You're riding BART. And as you're riding BART, you got your luggage and you get with your family, and then across from you is those front-facing seats where the people, if they sit there, you just stare at each other. Super fun. And so somebody sits down, they sit down slowly, and they're just not breaking eye contact with you. And they just stare at you for a full half second, which feels like 8 minutes. And you're just like, and then they smile at you. And then they say, it's all good. And then they get up and walk away. And you're like, nope. Get your stuff, we're heading to the other car. Like, we ain't doing it. But what ends up happening is when somebody does that, acts weird, you don't know them, you never seen them, but as they sit down and they smile at you, you're like, should I know this person? Do I know this person? How do I know this person? From work, from school? Where do I know them? From church? I don't know. And then they go, it's all good. What's all good? What do you mean it's? What do you mean good? Why are you here? Who are you? And the whole thing is you're kind of freaked out. You're trying to make sense of the situation. You're trying to assess. You're trying to evaluate. You're trying to figure out, is this a threat? What is going on right now? You know what you're doing? You're trying to understand and you're trying to have insight. That's the whole concept, is you're trying to make sense of what is happening to you and what is happening around you. The third thing is to receive instruction in wise dealing. And so you'll see instruction in wise dealing. And it is about, you need to receive somebody teaching you how to handle this. It's the idea of paying attention to a situation and to act decisively. So if you're in a situation like on Bart and you're like, what do? I got to protect my family. I got to protect myself. This person's going to stab me with a rusty bayonet that they found in the street somewhere or something like that. And you're trying to make sense of what's happening. At some point, you have to make a decision. You have to make a decision on what to do, and it has to be decisive, which means you can't just be like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. We could do this, we could do that, I don't know. Instead, instruction in wise dealing is the idea that you are, through the book of Proverbs, receiving inside instruction, valuable information on how you should act in any given situation decisively. Another one is to give prudence to the simple. Now, let me tell you, when you see in the book of Proverbs the word simple, it doesn't mean somebody who is just kind of like, I don't worry about a lot of complicated things. I just am a simple man. No, it's not that. What it actually means is somebody, and it could be translated, somebody who is undecided or uncommitted. A simple person is an uncommitted person. In the book of Proverbs. And what's interesting is when you have the simple, it's really connected to youth. So the book of Proverbs is about instruction and wisdom and all this kind of stuff directed towards those who are youthful, those who are young. And in the Old Testament, generally speaking, those who are young and youthful are those who are not yet responsible for others. That is, they're not yet married, they don't have a family, things like that. So what you have is the youthful who are simple. You have the youthful who are not yet committed. And the question is, committed to what? And the answer is committed to wisdom. They have not yet made the decision to be wise. They have been offered the opportunity, but they haven't chosen it yet. They're still kind of waiting to make that decision. Now, the book of Proverbs will give prudence to the uncommitted. And the idea of prudence is to have tactics, is another word. Now, if you've ever played the game Capture the Flag, you understand there's two teams, there's a flag on each end of the field, and one team tries to go and get the flag against the other team, and you get tagged out and all this kind of stuff. Now, before the game starts, usually your team is like, all right, you three over there, you run as fast as you can and go up this way, and you two over here, run across the field, and you two over there, I'll sit here, and then I'll do this. It's called tactics. You're making plans. You're trying to assess the weaknesses of the other team. You're trying to figure out what assets or what things do you have on your team that can help you win. That's the idea of having prudence. You're evaluating what is at your disposal. You're evaluating what is happening around you. And so the book of Proverbs, for those who are youthful, simple, undecided as to whether or not they will become wise, the book of Proverbs is there to help you to make decisions on strategy, what to do. It also gives discretion to the youth, which is another way to say to make plans. And here's one thing that we know about youth. The younger you are, the harder it is to understand the results or the consequences of your actions. But the older you get, the more you can abstractly think and be like, if I did this, this is probably what's gonna happen. If I punch my neighbor in the throat, I'll probably get in trouble. I shouldn't do that. When you're 2, you don't think about that. You're just like, neighbor, and that's what you do. But as you get older, you start to realize there's consequences for certain actions. And so discretion is the idea, oh, I should probably think about this. I should probably make a plan about this. I should foresee outcomes. I should anticipate what will happen by this decision. And then in verse 6, you see another thing is it provides understanding to help you understand Proverbs, to help you understand wise sayings and the words of the wise. Now, I want to highlight the fact that this is for the wise and those who are already considered learned. Sometimes when I talk about the book of Proverbs and I'm like, it's for youthful people, it's really about making a decision, will you become wise? Some of the older people with gray hair like myself would be like, oh, I'm already wise. I don't need to listen to this. I already know what's going on. And the reality is you don't. And the fact that you said that shows how little you know. The thing is, even if you think you're wise, the book of Proverbs is for you. It's going to help you become wiser, help you to understand more fully, more completely, more thoroughly wisdom, to understand Proverbs and things like that. So this is a little bit for everyone. And if anyone thinks, I don't need Proverbs, or if you've only bought into the idea that a proverb a day will keep the devil away, because there's 31 days in a month sometimes, and there's 31 chapters in Proverbs, and so I'll just read a chapter a day and then I'll be set. Here's what I want you to understand. If Proverbs is about thinking, about the truth of the proverb, about the reality of your situation, trying to see if they're in line, do you harmonize with God's creation? Are you actually in line with how he's created the world to operate? That's going to take some time. It's going to take some thinking. It's going to require you to process a bit, to evaluate, to assess, which means you can't speed through this. And the other thing is you can't already think you have all the answers before you ask the questions. You have to slow down. You have to be honest. And that requires patience. So how is this expressed? Oh, let's go back to the text. How is this expressed? And what I mean by that is, as you think about the book of Proverbs, how is it that you can kind of know whether or not you're being wise? And this little in right here, this preposition, is how we know. And another one is the understanding. It actually is the one who understands, obtains guidance. So there's two things. How do you know if you're growing in wisdom? Well, your wisdom will be expressed by your understanding of right words and your understanding of right living. And what I mean is you will live rightly and you will understand words. There's the two things. Now, I want to be clear about the righteousness, justice, and equity thing real quick. The word righteousness means right living. It means to act rightly, to be right. It's the foundation of living. God has revealed how we as human beings ought to live, and that is righteousness. So that's the foundation. Justice is the idea that that foundation of righteousness has been violated somehow. And that violation has created a victim and somebody who is the one who has victimized. Justice is when the victim is delivered, when the victimizer is punished, and when righteousness is reordered or reestablished. It is not justice when God's righteous order is not established. That's called injustice. God is the author of righteousness. God is the author, therefore, of justice, how to put things right. And then the word equity in the Bible means that people are treated equally. Now, it comes from the geometry world, and think of the X and Y axis on like a geometric kind of chart thing. And they're straight lines, straight. And that's kind of the idea of equity. It's moral straight lines. It's not crooked lines. It's not bent lines, straight lines. And what it means is, morally speaking, everybody is evaluated according to the straight lines of God's righteousness. In our culture today, equity means something completely different. Equity means equal outcomes. And what it means for our society is when we achieve equity, everyone comes out at the same place. Now, in order to get to the same place, some people are further along than others. So those who advocate for equity, as defined as we all achieve the same at the end, they will have to disadvantage some people in order to advantage others. In other words, some people have, so we'll take from you and we'll give to the have-nots, so that way we're all equal. But that is not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches everyone, whether you are rich or poor or whatever walk of life, you're going to get a straight moral standard by which you will be evaluated. And we will not preference rich over poor or poor over rich. God makes the standard and you must align to it. So a wise person receives instruction on how to live in a righteous, just, and equitable manner. So that is right living. The other one is right words, right words. You pursue wisdom, you're going to understand Proverbs, which are sayings, and you're going to understand words, riddles, that kind of stuff. Now, this is important as we read the book of Proverbs. And let me show you why. Proverbs 15. To make an apt answer is a joy to a man, and a word in season, how good it is. Now, you probably know what it's like to give an apt answer. That means it's the right answer at the right time. Like somebody asks you a really hard question, and then for some reason or other, you give them an answer and you impress yourself with how good your answer was. You're like, wow, that was pretty good. And you feel joy. You're like, yeah, all right. And not only that, but then somebody then texts you later and they go, hey, you know what you said during lunch, man? That really meant a lot to me. That was exactly what I needed to hear at that time. And you're like, yeah, I feel good. Who else wants to go to lunch with me? You know what I mean? And so we understand that, like an apt answer, a good answer, an appropriate answer, man, it brings so much joy. And when you give a good word in season, man, that is so good. But here's the reality. Sometimes you can step on your toes and put your foot in your mouth. Here's what I mean. Whoever blesses his neighbor with a loud voice, hey, Frank, good to see you, but they do so rising early in the morning, it will be counted as cursing. You see, when Frank gets home from work at 3:30 and you're like, Frank, and he's like, hey, that's great. You do that at 3 o'clock in the morning, Frank doesn't like you. So, the right words at the wrong time are the wrong words. Does that make sense? So you need wisdom to know what words and at what time. What words and at what time. The book of Proverbs gives you the wisdom to understand because you're trying to make sense of stuff, trying to figure out, okay, what's my situation? Where am I at? What's God's reality? How does all this work? And so you're thinking, should I say this? I probably shouldn't say that. Should I say this now? Should I wait till later? I don't know. So we get like Proverbs 26. This is a fun verse. Answer not a fool according to his folly, lest you be like him yourself. Answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes. Which one? Because you'll be having a conversation with some fool, he's just vomiting out stuff that he doesn't even know what he's talking about. And you sit there and you go, I know Proverbs 26, 4 and 5. I should probably not say anything, or should I? I don't know, should you? Yeah, I shouldn't say anything. You sure? Because verse 5 says you should. Yeah, you're right, I should say something. Are you sure though? Because verse 4 says you shouldn't. What do? This is helpful because the book of Proverbs is there to give you some of the wisdom to help make sense of the situation. Because if you don't answer this dude when he's vomiting out nonsense, then you don't have to engage in some kind of wasted, time-killing conversation with some bozo who doesn't know what they're talking about. You're like, yeah, no, that ain't worth my time. Or he says something crazy and you're like, I think you need to know how much you don't know So let me help you so you don't be wise in your own eyes, thinking you know stuff when you don't. And the book of Proverbs is there to help you to know which is which. So the question for me is, well, how do you begin this process of becoming wise? Where does it begin? Verse 7, Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So, if you want to avail yourself to the book of Proverbs and receive the most benefit from it, where do you begin? You begin with God. Why? Because he is the wise creator and you are the creation. Therefore, we must fear God, and that means we have the proper relationship to him. He's creator, we're creatures. He's infinite, he is wise, he is sovereign, he is good, he is loving, he's eternal. We're none of those things. And therefore, we should tremble in his presence, knowing how limited and small we are in light of how vast and infinite he is. And if you start there, not as God as a concept, but God as creator, who personally creates us and desires personal relationship with us. If you start there, that is the first step on the path of wisdom. Got to start with God. Now, what is the practicality? Number 2, practicality. We're going to speed this up. Practicality of wisdom. How does it benefit us? Let's look in verse 8 and 9. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck. So you begin your first steps with God, having a right relationship with God. But here's what I want us to see, brothers and sisters. Wisdom begins in the home. Moms and dads, you cannot delegate the teaching of wisdom to those who do not know God. If wisdom begins with God, why would you delegate or farm out the teaching of wisdom to those who don't begin wisdom with God? So instead, what we do is in the home, moms and dads teach the wisdom of God because they themselves have it. And they teach the wisdom of God in their home so that when students go out to school and they learn other factoids and things about God's creation, they can then put it in as puzzle pieces into a grand understanding of how God has created the world. Does that make sense? So that's the beginning of practicality. But then what we're gonna see is this, is we're gonna see young people, that is the uncommitted, they're gonna be enticed or tempted to sin. And you see this in verse 10 to 14, where the parents say, my son, if sinners entice you, do not consent, do not agree to go with them. And then the temptation is really interesting. Watch this. Come with us. Let us lie in wait for the blood. Let us ambush the innocent. Let us. Verse 13, we shall find precious goods. We shall fill our house with plunder. We will have one purse. Now, why am I talking like that and emphasizing that? Because the greatest temptation to sin for the uncommitted, youthful, is when people around them try to lure them in with the offer of community, belonging. Come with us. You're kind of on your own, but if you come like us, you do like we do, you dress like we dress, you talk like we talk, come with us, then you'll be something. And that is a temptation for all young people, to just kind of fit in with the crowd and go with the flow, because you don't want to stand out. That's the worst thing you could do as a 13-year-old, is stand out. Oh my gosh, somebody kill you right now, you know? That's what they say. Stop it, please. So that is one of the lures and one of the temptations. The practicality of wisdom, however, let's look at this in verse 15 all the way through the end of 19. My son, don't walk with them. Hold back your feet. Don't run to evil, verse 16. Verse 17, it's in vain that a net is spread in the sight of any bird. Now, I'm not a trapper or a hunter, but if I were, I probably wouldn't let the thing I'm trying to trap or hunt know I'm there. Does that make sense? You're like, I'm hunting this deer. let me run after it. That's not gonna work. So if you try to trap a bird, you try to trap an animal, but then you alert the animal to what you're trying to do, it's wise enough to go, nah, I'm out. But here's the interesting thing with people, we are not so wise. We are fools, in fact. And then what we see in verse 18, there's men who lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. The reality is when you set yourself up on evil and try to get unjust gain or whatever, you're never gonna get away with it. You just don't. And it ruins you from the inside out. But you see, fools can't see it. They're setting a trap for themselves and they don't even see it. And that's why they think you're crazy for saying something. But the reality is they're crazy because they don't see it. And then the last verse, it takes away the life of its possessors. It just takes away your life. When you just go with the flow, you go with the crowds, you sin with sinners, you're gonna be destroyed by it. So that's the practicality. If you have wisdom, you can actually see things for what they are. Now, I see where this is headed. I see how these choices are gonna end up taking me somewhere I'm not trying to go. And a wise person will go, nah, you're crazy. All right, the proposal of the book of Proverbs. Now this comes in verses 20 to 22 of chapter 1. You see, wisdom is crying out in the street. Everywhere you turn, wisdom is saying, come, come, come. Crying out in the street, raising her voice in the marketplace, in the noisy streets, come, 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 get wisdom. Verse 22, how long, O uncommitted ones, youthful ones, will you love being simple? Like, how long are you just gonna sit on the fence about this? How long are you just gonna sit there and be like, no, I'm not gonna decide? You ever heard of FOMO, the fear of missing out? And then it's changed to FOBO, the fear of a better offer? Where people sit around, they're like, I can't say yes to this because that might mean saying no to that. And then pretty soon you're sitting alone on your phone all night. And you're like, that was a better choice? Of all the options, sitting alone on your phone all night, that's the best choice? Yikes. So that's the question. Will you choose wisdom? And then what ends up happening is the uncommitted, they're invited to become wise, but the reality is they probably will reject the proposal because that's sometimes what happens. And when you reject the proposal to be wise, you have to understand that you will reap the consequences. So in verse 24, wisdom called out, but they refused to listen. Wisdom stretched out the hand, but no one took hold of it. They didn't believe the counsel. And so what happens in verse 26, wisdom will laugh at your calamity. In other words, you chose the foolish path, and now it's upended your life and ruined your life, and wisdom goes, I told you so. But the reality is, you have to sleep in the bed you make. You will reap what you sow. And then in verse 27, when terror strikes you like a storm, calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, the wisdom is there to mock you, not to help you. Because it's saying, I told you so. You shouldn't have done that. And then what happens in verse 28, they call upon wisdom, but wisdom will not answer. They will seek wisdom with diligence, but wisdom will not be found because ideas and actions have consequences, and sometimes you can't undo what you did. Sometimes you say things, do things, think things. You can't undo it. It's there permanently, forever. Now, why did they not choose wisdom? Verse 29, because they hated knowledge. They did not choose to fear the Lord. They did not choose to take the first step that moves towards God. They chose the first step in a different direction. Maybe that they're wise in their own eyes. I don't need God. What's he gonna do? Tell me something I don't already know? I got this. And that is the way of fools. The way of fools would have none of wisdom's counsel. Verse 30, they despise the reproof of wisdom. And here's verse 31, they shall eat the fruit of their way, and they will have their fill of their own devices. You will have to reap your own consequences. You will have to sleep in the bed you make. You're going to have to embrace the consequences of foolish decisions if you don't embrace wisdom. So that's the proposal. This is your mission, should you choose to accept it. Will you be wise? Number 4, the profitability of wisdom from the book of Proverbs. So sometimes people ask the question, well, what's in it for me? How is this gonna help my life? Well, let me show you verse 1 through 5 of chapter 2. I love this. There's a bunch of conditional things in the first 4 verses, and then you're gonna get the great climax of verse 5. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. You see, the very first step towards God and being in right relationship with God is crying out, God, I need help. I need you. That's where you begin. All you need is need. That's all God asks of you. Bring me your need. And what does God do? Oh, verse 6, the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He shores up sound wisdom for the upright. He's a, watch this, shield to those who walk in integrity. He guards the paths of justice, watching over the way of his saints. And then one step towards God, crying out for your need, God providing for it. Then you will understand righteousness, justice, and equity in every good path. Wisdom will come into your heart. It will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will come. Understanding will come. God will deliver you, verse 12. And then if you look at verse 15, God will deliver you from men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So let me summarize it like this. If you cry out earnestly to God for wisdom, he will give it to you. And the result is you will have knowledge, you will have understanding, you will have wisdom, you will have protection, you will rightly be able to interpret your life and situation, you'll have adequate ability to make plans and make decisions and act upon it. You will understand righteousness and justice and equity in every good path. You won't be gullible, you won't be easily deceived, you won't be manipulated by bad actors, and there are plenty in this world to go around. You will be protected. That sounds like a good deal to me. And then lastly, our pathways. This comes in two sections in Proverbs 9. So turn to Proverbs 9. We'll see in verses 1 through 3, and we're going to compare that to verses 13 to 15. Because there's 2 pathways, and the pathways are marked by the women who oversee them. It's a personification. What that means is this concept called wisdom and this concept called foolishness is shown to be 2 different women. And so the first woman is Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom. And if you see this in verse 1 through 3, Lady Wisdom, she builds her house. She has sown her 7 pillars, that it's a perfect kind of house. She slaughtered her beasts, she has mixed her wine, she has also set her table, she's made every preparation necessary to have wisdom, and then she sends out her young women to call from the high places in the town. So that's Lady Wisdom. She makes all the preparations and sends out invitations. Lady Folly, verse 13 to 15, she's loud. She's seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. Notice she also has a house. She takes a seat at the highest places in the town. That is, she claims to be important, and she calls out to all those who pass by who are going straight on their way. So Lady Wisdom has a house, and she calls out, come inside. Lady Folly has a house, and she calls, come inside. Now watch verses 4 through 6. We go back to Lady Wisdom. Lady Wisdom says, whoever is simple, and this is what's being called out, whoever is simple, let him turn in here. To him who lacks sense, Lady Wisdom says, come, eat of my bread and drink of the wine that I've mixed. Leave your simple ways and live and walk in the way of insight. I love this. Leave your simple ways, your undecided ways, and live and walk in the way of insight. Come and eat and drink of Lady Wisdom's provisions. Come to Lady Wisdom's house and be satisfied with the goodness she has to offer. And then there's Lady Folly, same cry. Whoever is simple, let him turn into here. Whoever lacks sense, Lady Folly says, stolen water is sweet. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. You notice both ladies offer food and drink. One is a precious, beautiful, good food. The other one is stolen, deceptive. In Lady Wisdom's house, there's life. In Lady Folly's house, there are the dead. Her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So there's two pathways here, brothers and sisters. The way of Lady Wisdom and the way of Lady Folly. Lady Wisdom brings life, Lady Folly brings death. Lady Wisdom is good, Lady Folly is evil. And it's a basic decision you have to make. Which path will you take? Which proposal will you accept? Because both are crying out to you, come this way. Now, this is how the book of Proverbs connects with the rest of the Old Testament, because we read in Deuteronomy 30, this is the last sermon, so to speak, that Moses gives to the people. And in Deuteronomy 30, here's what he says. He says, I have set before you, Israel, right before they get to the promised land, I have set before you life and good, death and evil. Let me say it differently. Israel, I have put before you Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. Now, if you obey the commands of the Lord, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. In other words, if you follow the path of Lady Wisdom and live a life of wisdom that is oriented and in harmony with God's will, there is great blessing that comes your way. However, if you choose Lady Folly and you will not listen, he says in verse 18, I declare to you today that you will surely perish. You shall not live long in the land. And he says in verse 19, I call heaven and earth to witness against you that I have set before you Lady Wisdom and Lady Death, or Lady Folly, which is life and death, blessing and curse. What will you choose? Choose life. Choose Lady Wisdom. Choose good. Choose her, and you will not be ashamed. Now you compare that to what we read in the profitability section of Proverbs 2. If you walk in the way of the good, that is Lady Wisdom, and you keep the paths of righteousness, the upright will inhabit the land. Remember, that's what God promised. He's like, you will have the land. You will have the land. Pay attention. You will have God's favor. If you walk according to Lady Wisdom, you will have the land. But the wicked are going to be cut off from the land. The way of Lady Folly is no bueno. It goes nowhere. That's why when you go to Hobby Lobby, you buy these signs. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Because the question is, will you serve the Lord or will you serve other gods? Will you serve the Lord and in the pathway of Lady Wisdom, or will you serve other gods in the pathway of Lady Folly? What will you choose? Now, how does this connect to Jesus? I have to do this quickly. I thought I would give you the short sermon. Turns out I'm giving you the full one. How does this connect to Jesus? When Paul's praying for the church, he prays that their hearts would be encouraged. He prays that they would be knit together in love. And then he prays for this amazing theological truth, that they would reach the riches of full assurance of understanding and the knowledge of God's mystery, which is Christ. And what's important about Christ? It's in Christ are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. So if you go, okay, well, I want to choose the pathway of Lady Wisdom, how do I do that? You take your first step towards God, but how do I do that? Well, you need to recognize that Lady Wisdom is pointing you to Jesus Christ. Lady Wisdom is saying, come to my house and eat and drink and be satisfied. And Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Because all of God's wisdom and knowledge are hidden as a treasure in Christ. And the reason why Paul is saying that is so that no one would delude you with plausible arguments. Here's the reality. The world is going to try to convince you that their way is better, and you need to be able to see through that and to know what's what. You need to know the season. You need to know the reality. You need to know what's true. You need wisdom. You need to follow the pathway of Lady Wisdom, and that pathway leads ultimately to eternal life, but it goes through the doorway of Jesus Christ. Let me show you one last thing. Is Jesus himself is so amazing. When he was a little kid, he was growing, he became strong in Luke 2. He was filled with wisdom. And in fact, he was, as a young boy, sitting in the temple, and he was sitting among the teachers. And if you notice this, he was listening to them and asking them questions. And so here's the thing is sometimes people think, well, I'll just ask God for wisdom and he'll give it to me. But the reality is sometimes you have to work for it. You have to pick up your Bible and read things. You got to know stuff. You got to ask questions. You have a conversation. It takes effort. But in our culture of just quick fix and easy stuff, we're like, can I just ask for it and get it like downloaded? No. Jesus became wise because he worked at it. Why do you think you get a fast pass on work? You don't. And in fact, when Jesus was teaching, it was amazing. I'll just quickly say this. When he was teaching, the people were like, man, where did he get all these things? Where did he get this wisdom? Because the reality is God does give wisdom, but he gives it through your effort. He gives it through your effort. Now let me combine some things and we'll go to the Lord's Supper. If you remember Proverbs chapter 9, the call is to leave your simple ways, leave your youthful ways, leave your uncommitted ways so that you could live and instead walk in the way of insight. And the word insight is like truth. Choose Lady Wisdom so you'll live because it's the way, it's truth. Live, it's the way. It's the truth. Does that sound familiar to you guys? Because Jesus said, I am the truth. I am the life. I am the way. If you want wisdom and you want to live rightly, no regrets, in harmony with God's will, it only happens through Jesus, which means this, you must choose Jesus. Because he is the way. He is the truth. He is the life. And Lady Wisdom and the whole book of Proverbs is like a gigantic road sign with an arrow going, he's the big deal. Pay attention to him. So let's close as we prepare our hearts for communion with recognizing this, that it was in God's wisdom that he sent forth his one and only Son to live, die, and rise again, to save sinners from their foolishness, to restore them, redeem them, and by his justice to make things right and to put us on a path of wisdom. Father, as we come now to the Lord's Supper, I do pray that you would meet with us. God, we know that eating and drinking is not how we get saved. It is not even how we get right with you. We've already been made right with you because of Jesus. But today, by eating and drinking with faith, we are reminded of everything you've done to make us right with you. And by that same faith, you encourage us and strengthen us for the days ahead. So God, meet with us, I beg you, and we'll thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.